Hi everyone, my name is Marcus Beck. I'm the program scientist for the Tampa Bay Estuary Program, and my talk is about how we are using open science to address both current and future threats to the health of the Bay. So, if you're familiar with Tampa Bay, you know that it's kind of a success story in terms of how it's recovered over the years. Basically, between the years of 1950 to 1980, the bay lost about half of its seagrasses. This was a period of heavy eutrophication. Um, Following that, beginning in the 80s and then basically in the 90s after that, there was some water quality regulations that were put in place through the Clean Water Act, as well as some state legislation that controlled basically point sources entering the bay. And the Tampa Bay Estuary Program was started around that time as well. And we, as a program, were critical to mobilizing and getting the community together to sort of understand the problems of nitrogen pollution and how they can be controlled cooperatively to improve water quality. And basically, from the 90s through more or less present day, there were several projects that were implemented to help address water quality problems or habitat restoration. And as a result, seagrasses basically recovered to historical levels that were observed in the 1950s. And this was about 2016 to 2018. Now, since that time, so 2018 to present, we've actually seen a large decline in seagrasses. So this success story that we use or we describe for our program, even though it is a success story, we are kind of trending in the other direction. So you can see basically 2016, the peak, and then the drop down to 2022. So we've lost about a third of our seagrasses that we gained up to 2016. So we can't keep telling this story about the Bay being a success story, even though it is. There are many current challenges that inhibit our ability to manage the Bay or affecting the environmental resources that the Bay provides. So, in addition to seagrass loss, population growth is always going to be a problem. The watershed continues to take in new inhabitants every day. So as a result, there's just lots of development going on that threatens habitat, native habitats in the region, as well as critical shoreline areas. Old Tampa Bay to the northwest part of Tampa Bay has issues since about 2008 with water quality, primarily as a function of seasonally recurring pyrididium blooms. And then other things, chronic stressors like climate change, are only going to get worse, increased storm, sea level rise, and the effects that has on shoreline habitats, as well as just water quality. And then other acute events that I'll talk about a little bit later in terms of their sort of one-off impacts that can be problematic. So as a program, we obviously we're charged with managing the bay, or at least getting partners together to do that. But we also try to use science as the foundation for all of our work. So we want to develop consensus on the best approaches for restoring and managing the bay, and science is helping us do that. And basically, we want to have science be not just a foundation, but the science we provide should be timely, responsive, and accurate. So we have partners that depend on this. And one way that we decided to try to do this is to use open science as a vehicle for thinking about better ways to sort of bridge the divide between the research community to the science and what managers actually need to make informed decisions. So we think about open science as a cake. So all of these things are interconnected in terms of the various communities we try to work with for managing the bay. So we work with researchers, we work with environmental managers and policymakers, and the public. And so we try to serve up information to these different communities and deliver it in different ways, where each piece depends on the other parts. So at the top, we have very high level information, web resources, fact sheets, educational materials, things that are going to be helpful for the public. Below that, there's more engaging things, sort of actionable things that managers and policymakers can use to make more informed decisions. So that's like dashboards, report cards, other prioritization tools. And then at the bottom, because science is the foundation of everything we do, this is where we see the bulk of the technical components of our work. And again, this is very important for us because all the other pieces wouldn't exist without the science foundation. So these things span the gradient between kind of general and actionable at the top down to very specific and foundational at the bottom. How this works in practice is basically because these pieces are connected, we can serve it up in different ways. And so this schematic shows you literally different pieces of the cake that we have available for the research community, managers, and the public. And so at the bottom, we're looking at a lot of the historical documents that are established a foundation for what we do as a program. We're extracting methods and ideas from those documents and coding them up and putting them online, basically, in a place that anybody can access them. We put a lot of these things on GitHub, and these products on GitHub fuel other products like dashboards or more actionable summary products at the top that can be served or that could be used as prioritization tools. And all of these things are connected to our website as well. So we have a lot of work on the back end, coding and analysis tools that help us deliver products seamlessly to our website. So again, the cake is all connected, and it's using all of these open science tools. At the heart of this is an R package we developed called TBEP tools. And so I've been working here about 3 years, and one of the first things I did was started building this package. And this is a set of open source R functions that let us pull in data from our partners, develop or estimate various indicators, and report outcomes to our partners or the public. And again, this is freely available on GitHub. It's under full version control, meaning the history of it is documented, and anybody can access it. So it is accessible and findable. And it is, it's the workhorse for everything we do in terms of our reporting methods. All of our dashboards, our 2-pager report cards use the functions and TBEP tools to deliver the content. And this is just another schematic showing you how this works in practice. So as I said, we have a strong foundation of various technical reports that establish a basis for a lot of our work, but those methods are opaque. They're not necessarily reproducible. And so TBEP tools takes a lot of those methods out of those reports and relies on partner data. So there's a seamless link from pulling in data from the source, and then estimates whatever reporting products or tools we need with clearly coded, reproducible methods that are available on GitHub. And those methods then produce things that are essentially distilling results for various actions. Also at the top of the cake, the website I said is a big part of what we provide as a program. It's an entry point for many of our partners to the things we do, and a lot of the content on there is, again, seamlessly linked to these open source products. And so on the web page, you might see something like this on the bottom right that shows the results for some reporting product for a given year. Well, actually, this web content is built in seamlessly with TBEP tools, as well as some document preparation systems that basically link the data to the actual web content you're seeing. That way, there's less errors, copying and pasting information. It's timely, and it's just kind of a better way to essentially work smarter and not harder. So I wanted to provide an example of how open science has helped us as a program. All the previous slides were kind of talking about how we use it generally, but there are some very specific current examples that highlight how we've leveraged the open science tools to basically bring science to the forefront of decision makers. So Piney Point is a facility on the southeast shore of Tampa Bay that is an old mining processing facility for phosphates in Florida, and it essentially has been sat dormant for 2 decades, but it has all this wastewater on site from fertilizer production as well as some other activities. But in March of 2021, there was basically a breach in the liner of one of the holding ponds, and there was possibility of the holding ponds to basically collapse. And to prevent, a huge disaster, the Piney Point facility was authorized to discharge essentially 215 million gallons of this wastewater to Lower Tampa Bay. And this was a huge, not just phosphorus influx, but nitrogen input into the bay. And so there was obviously a lot of concern about the potential impacts. And so we had several partners collecting information in response to this event so we could describe the potential negative effects on bay resources. And we used open science tools to basically synthesize all that information using a transparent, efficient, and reproducible workflow. So we had all of our partners dropping files onto Google Drive, and then we at the SRA program synthesized all that information using open source tools. All of the methods for synthesis were made available on GitHub and sort of exposed to various testing services to make sure the data checks were appropriate, and we basically developed an application to showcase the data results as they were coming in more or less real time. So there was a front-facing dashboard that our partners could go to see the most current data that was collected in response to this event. So this is our Piney Point environmental dashboard. It was a monumental effort to get this off the ground, but because we were able to leverage a lot of the open science tools, not just the open source software, but these various platforms for making the data and information more accessible, this was a heavily used tool that our partners were able to access during the course of the events following Piney Point. And just to give you an example of some of the types of information we provided to our partners, there's, as you saw on the last page, tens of thousands of measurements that were collected in response to this. So oftentimes our partners wanted to know, well, what was the effect? And so we basically let them dive into the data at their own, wherever they wanted to find the information, they could dig deeper. And so for this example, you can click on a site and see a time series of the data that was collected and what it was relative to long-term monitoring conditions or long-term water quality conditions in the bay. So this was a great tool to provide context of what was actually happening. And we did find this to be a very valuable tool. So I said it was a platform that our partners accessed, but we saw a lot of positive response. So people were tweeting about it. This individual, he's a county commissioner, Charlie Justice, chairs our technical advisory committee, our policy board, and he tweeted about it, and other avenues were tweeting about it. So various news resources were tapping into it, and through various analytics, we could see that people were actually logging on and viewing the results. So this is just kind of a long-term time series of number of unique users and how they accessed the information, how they got there, whether it was from email blasts or shared via social media or just direct from a website referral. So in essence, like I said, we often describe this story of Tampa Bay of being an environmental success story, and it definitely is in terms of the long-term recovery, but because of these recent trends we're seeing with seagrass losses and climate change stressors and acute events like Piney Point, we know that the ecology of the bay has changed from what it was historically, and sort of the paradigms we use to manage the bay are certainly still relevant, but there might be different ways we need to think about planning for the future. So we need, continued investments in protecting and restoring the bay's resources. That's always been our mantra as a program. And we do think that open science, even though it's a relatively new addition to the program, will continue to be an asset for helping us reach different audiences and making the science more actionable. And just to show you what the future kind of looks like for Tampa Bay, this is a land use change analysis of the watershed from 1990 to more or less present day. And these are the various habitats in the watershed, and you can see that this is native lands up here, and these are restorable lands here, basically lands that we think through restoration projects could be perhaps restored to native habitats or native plants. You can see from 1990 to present, these land use types have all been converted to developed land. So we're losing opportunities every single day as more and more people come to our watershed. And unless we, again, think intentionally about how we manage the bay and its resources, um, we could definitely lose what we have available to us. So with that, I will take some questions if I were in person, but thank you for listening, and hopefully I'll see you in person at the conference.